The following content is for entertainment and educational purposes only. It does not constitute means for diagnosis, healthcare advice, nor treatment. Make use of a qualified healthcare professional for such purposes.
Now, we talked previously about prenatal development. We talked about physiological development. We talked about personality development. Let's talk a little bit about cognitive development. What I refer to cognitive development is that you're going to go through a set of transitions, right? You're going to go through a set of transitions, patterns of thinking. And these transitions are going to involve aspects of reasoning, remembering, and perhaps at higher levels, you are going to engage in problem solving. Now, who was one of the individuals that we credit through the scientific study and perhaps initial observations of cognitive development? Well, that was John Piaget. Now, John Piaget also proposed a stage type of development, just as I explained earlier with Erikson. So he also did consider that individuals go through stages in order to develop cognition. And every time you see cognition, always remember that we are looking into thinking, right? Patterns of thinking. Now, how is it, according to Piaget, that we start developing, right? That we start developing our sense of cognition? How do we start developing thinking? The first aspect that we will consider is the Sensori Motor Period, a Sensori Motor Stage. Generally, this occurs from birth until about the age of 2. So from birth, 2 years old. And how is it that I start developing my patterns of thinking? That is because the child is starting to coordinate, right? It's starting to coordinate that sensory input with motor actions. So, for example, you start seeing that the child does have a sensory response to, say, an object, right? So sound or a form of texture. So the child starts developing patterns of thinking simply because of the environment around him or her. The problem with that is that, imagine, according to Piaget, your development is going to rely upon your stimuli around you, right? Is this environment around the child nurturing? Does he have toys? Is there musical boxes, puzzles, things that the child can come across and study and investigate and use that sensory output to say, oh, this is new. I wonder what this is. And then the child is going to start developing cognitive features. What would happen if this child is not in a nurturing environment? So imagine what the impacts could be in terms of thinking if that child did not have the ability to coordinate that sensory input with motor actions. Now, an interesting aspect of this stage is object permanence. Object permanence. What we refer to this phenomenon is a child recognizes that an object is still going to continue regardless if I can't see it. And some of you, those of you who have children, or those of you who have younger siblings or nephews, you might have played with your niece or nephew or son or daughter, and you'll be in front of your child, and then you cover your face. And what happens? The child thinks, he disappeared. Where did he go? Because they don't have object permanence. If I can't see it, it doesn't exist. But you and I know that just because we don't see something, it doesn't cease to exist, right? Like if I leave this room, I still exist. Like I still have a birth certificate and a social security number. Like I'm still there. But a child does not have that capacity yet. That is what we call object permanence, right? So some of you might have seen it in person. Let's move into our second stage according to Piaget when it comes to our cognitive development. That is the pre-operational period, pre-operational period. You'll see that now we're moving towards the range from 2 to 7 years old. One of the interesting characteristics of the pre-operational period is that we start developing symbolic thought. We start understanding symbols. Notice that we start thinking during this time that we can go back, right? That we can go back. What does that mean? Notice that a child during this time does not understand that if I cut something, I can put it back together. Right? They don't have that ability. They think just because something is broken, it is broken, it ceased to exist. There's no way we can revert this, right? I can't glue that little toy together. That's why it doesn't matter if you try to fix your child's toy, they're still going to be crying because there's just no way that that object is going to be the same that it used to be. Another aspect of this stage is conservation. With conservation is that awareness that we may have that those physical quantities are going to remain the same, right? So if I have 10 ounces of a liquid, right, and I pour it in 2 glasses, the child, now it's going to think I have more because I see 2, right? So if I see 2 glasses, that means there is more, right? And in reality, it remains constant. There's still 10 ounces irrespective, but the child doesn't see that. What the child is going to see is, well, there's 2 now, right? So there's more. Great. Now I have more. Now, in order to answer Dr. Daniel's question earlier, generally around this stage, around 2 to 7 years old, children are egocentric. They have limited ability to be able to see aspects from another person's point of view. I want to go to the park right now, even though daddy has a fever and daddy can't take you to the park. But I want to go to the park right now. I want to go to the pool today. So notice that it is difficult, right? For us, we understand, well, it sucks that dad has a fever. Maybe we can't go to the park today. Maybe we can't go to the pool. Because we can see what he sees. He is suffering. He's in bed. He's got ice on his forehead. He's suffering. I can understand that. However, a child during this time, it's immensely difficult. They have a very limited ability to understand that process. Something really interesting is animism. And for those of you who are in writing and English and poetry, things of that nature, you have seen this term before. Children during this time sincerely believe that everything is alive. Everything has an ability. People who, for example, attribute human-like characteristics to inanimate and non-human objects, and some individuals do see them as venerable, right? Interestingly, I have a client right now that's like that. You know, she thinks that things that are not alive are, for example, rocks are not alive, but she prays to them as she would any other person, and she has her wishes upon these crystals and these rocks. And you and I know that rocks are not alive, but to her, that is her belief. So she truly believes that. And she actually brought them to my office the other day. She brought a bunch of hair tied up and some rocks to show me. And I'm like, look at that. That's new. Nobody brought hair to my office before thinking it's alive. So that was fun. That was fun. I loved it. She's probably my favorite patient right now. Yo, like I love her. I look forward to seeing her. It's so much fun. I love it. I love it. But yeah, you're right. People start attributing characteristics to inanimate objects as animate. Not only that, they consider it a religion as well, which is her case specifically. So I'm learning a lot from her. Let's move into our third stage. And that third stage is concrete operational. Concrete operational. Notice that the term that stands out to me is concrete. This refers to is when a child, generally between the ages of 7 to 11, notice that in this particular case, a child can only perform and can only understand that is tangible, that is concrete. I'd argue there are many individuals in adulthood, past 11 years old, that still have concrete thinking. So what does this mean? It means that children during this time are unable to have abstract reasoning, right? Think about your theoretics, your theoretical physics. Think about psychology, cognition, personality. These terms will be immensely difficult for a child to understand because they are not abstract. They are not concrete. If I told a child, tell me what love is, they're going to say, and actually kind of cute, because yesterday I had a 5-year-old client and I asked her how did she know that daddy loved her? And she said, because he takes me to the park. Okay? So notice that you and I would say things about, well, my dad cares about me, or my dad shows me support. These are all abstract. They're not concrete. Therefore, for a child, that would be very difficult to understand. I'd argue there's adults that still abstract and formal reasoning are immensely difficult for them. I actually had a family therapy yesterday with a family, which I see their daughter, and their daughter is immensely suicidal. She's tried to commit suicide a couple times. She has been restrained physically to pull her out of jumping from a roof or jumping off a moving vehicle. So I decided, okay, let's talk to mom and dad, because this is a little bit, this is more a family issue more than an individual client issue. And sure enough, mom and dad have very concrete thinking, right? So for example, dad mentioned to me yesterday, that, well, her mental health is not as important at her age. She just needs to focus on school. That is very concrete. Getting good grades. I can see an A. I can see a report card and see an A. I can see a B, but I can't see depression. Therefore, because my dad, so me, the father, I can't see depression. Therefore, it is unimportant, but I can see an A, a B, an F. So that's important. So that is an example of concrete thinking, right? Abstract thinking would be like, I can't see depression of my daughter, therefore it doesn't exist. She needs to focus on school because she's failing. That was his concern in therapy. Not that her child was trying to jump off a roof yesterday. Or the day before. So notice that even adults can still remain in this concrete operational period. Notice that now we start understanding conservation. We start seeing that things do in fact exist even if we can't see them, right? So during this time, we know that if dad goes to work, mom goes to work, they still exist. They didn't disappear. Now, the last stage that I would like to talk about is formal operations. Notice that now we are moving away from this concrete thinking. Now we are conducting formal aspects. Generally, if it were to occur, it occurs at around the age of 11 and above. So this is considered to be the last stage of cognitive development. Notice that in this particular case, individuals start understanding and enjoying abstract concepts, but they still understand concrete concepts, right? So I don't want you to think that just because you are in a formal operation stage after the age of 11, I don't want you to think, oh, well, I'm just doing away with concrete concepts, right? That's not true. We still need concrete concepts. So, for example, think about a threat, right? Think about a I like to use the example of a firearm, right? So a firearm is dangerous or it's not dangerous, right? There's no room for abstract thinking. It's simply a concrete aspect. This firearm can be dangerous or not. Is it unsafe? Is it not? Is it clear? Is it not clear? That will be a very concrete aspect. So notice that concrete thinking can be beneficial, right? So for example, clearing a firearm, making sure that this weapon is pointed in the right direction, that you're not putting your finger in the trigger. These are very concrete aspects. Whereas the arts, math, engineering, right? Engineering, I would argue, is more concrete, but I would argue math is more abstract, right? But engineering is the application of math, so, take that as you will. But I would argue that many individuals, unfortunately, don't ever reach this stage. And it is difficult, particularly in therapy, when you have clients like this, because I have a client who, her son, who is 8, has been arrested because he has stolen cell phones and money from businesses. And when I asked her about, so what's on your mind? What do you think your child is doing that, right? And her answer was concrete, very concrete answer. I think he steals because he just knows he can sell the cell phones and stuff and the tablets and he can make money. True, that could be it, right? But is it more of an abstract thing? Is this his way of telling you, I need you because you work 2 jobs? And if you had to pick me up from jail, I have you right now, whether it's good or bad attention, I got your attention. That is an abstract concept. But her first response was, I think he steals because he just wants the money. Whereas in my opinion, I think, which he has voiced before, is that he is sad that mom and dad both work 2 jobs. So he feels alone. He doesn't need money. Mom and dad work 2 jobs, both of them. It's not a matter of money. It's not a matter of concrete thinking. This is about formal thinking, rational thinking, logical thinking. So we had to talk about that, mom and I, and she started crying. She's like, I don't, you're right. I never spend time with my kids. She works Monday through Saturday and half Sunday. So, and she started talking about how is it that we can do some time management in order for your child to have that attention. My dad has he has a funny saying. I mean, my dad is a psychiatric nurse by trade, but he's also a musician. He actually just released an album, so that's pretty cool. Another album. But one of the things that he says is bad publicity is still publicity. And he's correct. You're still getting attention, right? You're still getting that currency. And I had to explain to mom that currency is not necessarily concrete. It's not the cold, hard Benjamins. Sometimes currency comes in the form of attention, right? That's why we post stuff on Facebook and Twitter and all that, because we get them likes and we get them followers, right? So I'm going to show you guys an example of how these stages.
New babies aren't quite sure what happens to objects when they leave their sight. Sky's mom keeps disappearing and reappearing. No wonder peekaboo is so much fun. During their first year, however, infants will learn an important concept: object permanence. Everything has a life of its own, even if it is out of sight.
At Maya's age, babies know to look for the object, but they might not have everything else straight. 10-month-old Simon is about to make a classic mistake. Although he watched us place the toy plane under the white cloth, he'll look for it where he last found it, not where he watched us hide it.
Can you look at these 2 glasses? Do you think that they have the same amount of juice? You think they have the same? Okay. Now we're going to pour this juice into this glass. Now, do you think that this glass has more juice, this glass has more juice, or do you think that they have the same amount?
That one has more.
This one has more, and why do you think that this one has more?
Because it's taller.
Okay, you ready? Okay. Does this row have more quarters? Does this row have more quarters, or do they have the same?
1, 2, 3. Wait. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're both the same.
They're the same?
5, 5.
Okay. Okay. Does this row have more quarters? Does this row have more, or do they have the same?
This one has more.
That one has more quarters?
Yeah.
Why does this row have more quarters?
Because it's more far away.
It's more far away?
Yeah, it's more far away than that. Looks bigger.
All right, we're going to play a game with the graham crackers, and we're going to share them between me and you, okay?
Okay.
Okay. Do you think that we shared those fairly?
No.
No, why not?
You have those and I have this one.
Well, what if we try this? Okay, can I put this down right there?
Okay.
Now is it fair?
Yeah.
Yeah, why is it fair now?
Because we both have 2.
Can you tell me what you see when you look at that from where you're sitting? What are some of the things that you see?
And a cat.
A cat.
And a tree and a bone.
Okay, now we're going to do the same thing. Can you tell me what you see when you look at it from that stool?
An owl.
An owl?
And him.
What is that?
A goat.
A goat?
Yeah.
Okay, is there anything else you see?
Yeah, right there.
Right there, what is that?
A tree.
A tree.
And that's another little tree.
Another little tree?
Yeah, right.
Okay. And can you tell me what I see when I look at this from where I'm sitting right here?
An owl.
Okay.
And a goat.
Mm-hmm.
And a little tree. And that. And that.
So first we're going to look at these 2 cups right here. Do you think there's the same amount of juice in this glass as there is in that glass?
They're even.
They're even? Okay. So we're going to take the juice from this glass and pour it into this one right here.
Okay.
Okay, so now we're going to look at this glass and that one. So do you think that there's more juice in this glass, more juice in this glass, or do you think that they have the same amount?
Same amount.
Okay, why do you think that they have the same amount?
Just because this is skinny doesn't mean it's not the same amount. It has the same amount of juice in it, but this one is just wider and this one's skinnier, but they have the same amount of juice in it.
It says, if you hit a glass with a hammer, the glass will break.
I knew that.
And then this one says, Dawn hit a glass with a hammer.
I knew that too.
So what happened to the glass?
It broke.
It broke. Why did it break?
Because the hammer's hard.
If you hit a glass with a feather, the glass will break.
No, it won't.
And this is the second rule. Dawn hit a glass with a feather. What happened to the glass?
Nothing.
Nothing happened? Why didn't anything happen?
Because the feather was soft.
If you hit a glass with a feather, the glass will break.
Okay.
And the second one, Dawn hit a glass with a feather. What happened to the glass?
It broke.
And why did it break?
Because the rule says if you hit a glass with a feather, it'll break. So if you hit a glass with a feather, it broke.
Notice that towards the end, she didn't have abstract thinking. She said, well, if the rule was that if he hits it with a feather, that it's going to break, then it must be that it's going to break. Because she was following concretely what the rule was, which is if we hit glass with a feather, it's going to break. So if Don hits something with a feather, it's going to break. But abstractly, we understand, no, that's not true. It doesn't matter what that concrete rule says. The reality, we know that that wouldn't occur. I can't break glass with a feather. But in her case, it's like, well, I guess that's the rule. So that's how it's going to remain. So you notice in this illustration that you will have children. And one of the interesting ones was the one with the little volcano. And he was saying what he was seeing. And he thought that the researcher would see the same thing he was seeing, when in reality, she didn't have a line of sight to that. But that's what we call in aspects of conservation, right? He didn't understand that those objects that he has seen initially, they're still there. Just because he can't see them doesn't mean they didn't exist. So when she asked him, hey, what can I see? He's like, well, she has to see what I see, because those other objects at the beginning disappeared. So the only thing she could see is what I am seeing. So I think this is a really fun illustration. It's a really fun way to look at the stages of development of cognitive thinking. So I think it was really interesting. For those of you who think, well, that last girl, I mean, she's just being silly. There's just no way. Yeah. Think about Nazi Germany, right? Nazi Germany, concrete thinking, which was a group of people, is not the same as us. And therefore, so for example, gypsy is considered a derogatory term. So now we use the term Romani. So they would murder individuals from the LGBT, persons with learning difficulties, persons with physical deformities, LGBT persons, people of color. Notice that we would say, just because that rule is there doesn't make it right. Just like that girl, right? But she said that rule is there, therefore it makes it right. So when we start thinking, oh, that's silly, nobody would do that. Millions of people do that every day. For example, following immoral laws, such as that of Nazi Germany. So when we think, oh, she's just being silly, there's a lot of people who actually do think that concretely and will follow things concretely. So any questions? Good deal. So let's revert back to our slide. All right. So if we revert back to our slides, you'll notice that we also have the aspects of cognitive development when it comes to Lev Vygotsky. Now, in this case, we're looking more into the social cultural theory. Now, according to Lev Vygotsky, what he argued is that we are going to establish cognitive development because of social interactions that we have with other people, right? So that you're going to develop language, for example, that you're going to develop language because of interactions with other persons, right? So because of your understanding with other people. Notice that he would argue that one of the ways that you could indeed develop cognition, develop your way of thinking, is through language. He argued that in order for us to engage in cognitive development, we needed that social interaction. And not only that, because of our language, right? And I would argue there is validity to that, because if I am not able to communicate, how am I going to be able to socialize with other individuals? So there's some aspects to that. Now, notice that he made a distinction, right? He started noticing a distinction between private speech and other forms of speech. So notice that he would argue that we utilize private speech in order to plan, right? In order to regulate our own actions, in order to accomplish our goals, right? So we utilize private language or private speech in order to develop our goals. Now, what he noted is that as we grow older, right, that private speech, right, that the child was doing on his or her own, notice that now it's going to become internalized, right? And it's within you. It's basically a dialogue that you have with yourself, right? So I'm not talking about being psychotic and having hallucinations and talking to, I have a client that has a demon, according to him, and her name is Crystal, and he talks to Crystal all the time, and Crystal tells him to kill his sister. which is, you know, something we've worked out. He doesn't want to kill her anymore, so we're doing good. We're doing good. Safety first, right, guys? Safety first. So that's different, right? That's a form of hallucination, whereas all of us use that private internal dialogue with ourselves. Now, when we are thinking about the theories we've discussed, I should say so far, remember that Erikson's is probably one of the most understood. It understands aspects of psychosocial crises. It explains aspects of social relationships. So for example, you with your parents, you with your neighbors, you with your community, you with society, you with your loved ones. So it does explain a wide variety of development. It is perhaps considered one of the most influential, right? Generally, because of our understanding and developing a sense of right or wrong. Now, this is immensely interesting because we do have stages of moral development, moral reasoning. And notice that this specific theory focuses more on that moral reasoning rather than that overt behavior. And that is what we're going to talk about in our next lecture. How is it that we develop morality, right? We talk about all sorts of morality. And next time, we are going to talk about where and how does morality develop and in a scientific sense.